I'm hopeful. I think we are live.
Hello.
We're back to the band is back together again. What was it that you called us this morning, Dan? The three tops.
The treetops. I like it.
So, how are we this month? Are we good? Enjoying this tropical British summer?
Yeah, well, I went camping in this beautiful weather last week, so it was surprisingly warm, but it was also surprisingly wet, and then it was surprisingly stormy, and then it was surprisingly windy, and then it was surprisingly balmy. But hey,
4 seasons in one day.
Yes, it's we're used to it. As I said to somebody today, we don't complain about it anymore. Now we're just used to it being mad. Now we've given up on the idea of having a summer in terms of weather. So it's you know what, fine.
Yeah, well, no, exactly. You know, I think the reality of it is that I was just saying to Darren about the fact that, you know, today is cold and rainy constantly. Next week it's just going to be hot and rainy. So, but hey, you know, there we go. But I guess that kind of leads us very nicely on to our theme, taking control in this illusion of control, and how much control do we actually have? Dan's smirking away there. So how much control do we have?
Pretty much none. So
straight to it, Dan.
Well, we like to think we're in control, don't we? I had an excellent session with a client today, which ended up being all about control. At first we were exploring fears of being wrong, fears of being embarrassed, fears of being exposed. And the more we uncovered, the more we peeled back the layers, the more we realized the thing he was fearing the most, and what was behind all those things, was the fear of not being in control. Mm-hmm. And so he'd like most of us do, had identified with his thinking and his rationality, because he felt that gave him an element of control. If he could step back and he could analyze things and he could think them through and he could make a plan, he felt like that was giving him control. And anytime where he couldn't do that, he withdrew. And so we had a really good discussion, actually. And it turns out that what we're going to do as an exercise for him is me and him are going to go on a roller coaster, because it frightens the life out of me and it frightens the life out of him. And at the end of the session, we got to the point where we agreed that there's no such thing as fearlessness, only feeling fear and doing it anyway. So we're going to go on a roller coaster and feel the fear and do it anyway. But the one thing we can control is ourselves. We can control how we respond to life. We can't control events. We can't control circumstances. We can't control how people behave or what they think about us or what they say, or even how they perceive us. We can't control that either. But what we can control is our response and how we behave. That is the one thing that we do have control of. But we do build up this illusion, this pretense that we're in control, because we're also frightened of not being. So we build up this pretense in ourselves that we're making these plans and we're doing these things and they're going to happen. If we all look back at our lives, nothing ever turns out how we thought it would, because we're not in control of it. And what we have to do in order to grow, in order to evolve, in order to succeed, is get used to the fact and be comfortable with the fact that we don't have control.
No, totally. Although, Mark, you put it, where's your big stick? That would have kept everybody in control.
This gives me power, but not control, Laura, because they're two very different things.
Oh, okay.
But no, I have to agree with Dan. Like it's extraordinary how often working with clients and how often issues come back to control.
Yeah.
How often it comes back to that piece of trying to, and we probably all heard it from a coaching perspective, you know, you're living in the circle of concern, which is, you know, external things, all the things that are outside of what you actually have any power over all the time. Yeah. Like even, you know, this stick and the stick that gives me power. And I can stand here with this idea, you know, and I've been to, maybe you haven't been to some of these strange events I've been to where, you know, people might have a talking stick, let's say, it's passed around the circle, and the person who has it has the power to speak. but they can't control what people hear. They can't control how people listen. They can't control how people respond or react to the things that they say. They can only control the words that are coming out of their own mouth and allow that to come out. And that's the big difference. Like, the power to speak is one thing, but you cannot control anything that happens once you put that out into the world. And this idea of control is what causes so much of our stress, so much of our anxiety. Like, myself and Dan, we both work so much with people who are being through burnout from a work perspective, you know, and are in that situation. And like, how many of us try to get all our emails done? Because once we get our email inbox cleared, we're in control. But then you go to bed and you get back up the next morning, there's already 74 emails sitting in that inbox. So I was only in control while I was asleep, and I hadn't even got it to 0. I got it down to at least 1 page. I didn't have to scroll past the first page. But, you know, and it's the illusion that if I can control that, I will be free of its hold over me. But it's not possible to be free of it.
No, it's so right. Have you ever read Ryan Holiday's book, The Obstacle is the Way?
No. I know of it, but no.
It's very
good.
But in there, and ironically, I'm surprised, Dan, that you haven't read it, because the analogy that he uses is the playing field in football. So you've got the playing field, so that we can influence, the control that we have, but then everything else is just the rules of the game. So we can't impact the rules of the game. We just accept that that's the frame in which we operate in. And actually, once you realise that them is the rules, actually just let go of them. And similarly, I was talking with a client about this earlier this week. Where they're all starting their career pathways. They're right, sort of many of them are right at the beginning of their journey, and questions I'm being asked is how can I maintain my authenticity through all of this, i.e. to be in control. Because of course, when you've gone through an education system that's basically given you a framework, that's given you those boundaries, that sense, a false sense, granted, of security, control, because it's very defined. When you step out into this sort of world where it's so busy, how you can't apply the same rules that you learn at school. So we're almost setting ourselves up for fail in the way that we are taught.
Yeah,
and then comes in all the steps that you described, Mark.
And that's the trouble, Lauren. It stays with us, doesn't it? We get taught, and we get taught that we need to do things in order to have them so we can be, or we have things in order to that we can be. And then, you get to our iPod and you go, hang on, that's not it, is it? No, it's about being, and then the doing and the having comes from there. And so we are set up to fail. We are set up with the illusion that we have some, you'll go and talk to your careers teacher, and your careers teacher will pretend you've got some sort of control over this. No, you don't. All you have is the direction of travel. This is the direction of travel I'd like to go in. And then you deal with what comes up. And we all get taught as well that clever people are logical and rational. So we think, and we think, and that traps us into this illusion of having control, because we think we have control, when actually we're not thinking machines. We're beings that feel, and it's our feelings actually that give us the clue of our direction of travel and where to go. And it's our, and yet we get taught, and particularly as blokes, I think, that, oh no, feelings are not where it's at. No, ignore them. They're going to lead you down the wrong path. That's woolly thinking, feelings. So yeah, we train ourselves to do all this thinking and all this rationalizing. And when we do that, we're just missing out on what's really happening. We're missing out on life. We're not there in the moment, actually enjoying what's going on and sensing and feeling and really, getting the juice out of life. And that's why we all develop these horrible things that get in our way and hold us back, like procrastination and perfectionism and all those things. That all comes from trying to be in control, from trying to be right. I remember for years, I had to be right. I had to know. And if I didn't, then oh God, I was in trouble. And the one day when I suddenly realized, it suddenly dawned on me, I don't know anything. And actually, if I'm not right, who gives a shit?
It's a hard thing to accept not being right. I know that as a husband. I was taught that very early on in my marriage, but it's like, Dan,
You're always right, even when you're wrong. What was the phrase that go? How the phrase goes? My father similarly used to say, my nickname is MF, my fault. So once I learned that, life was very easy.
Look, it's easy to joke about those kind of things, right? But it can be very hard, even from a relationship perspective. It can be very hard for people in a control piece, and to give away, as a relationship gets serious and you're giving away a part of your control over your own life, because you have to share a space with someone, you have to share a life with someone. And you touched on the idea of rules, Laura, and I think rules are very interesting from a control perspective. Like, we live in a society, and society has rules. Society has laws, and these laws and rules are designed to keep us under a certain amount of control, but really they're designed so that society can function in a certain way. Now, we had a global, we had not a global pandemic. A pandemic means it's global. We had a pandemic that meant that there was suddenly all these restriction on rules, and rules were supposed to apply. And a lot of us did, and some of us didn't. And particularly in your part of the world, the people in power didn't do it at all, which was, quite but so right, there are rules, but they can be broken, right? So there's a control piece there. And we bring that back to the individual. Every one of us has rules. So some of us will speed because we won't obey that particular rule. We think we can control how fast we can drive. Some people we will break different rules, but then our own personally, we have rules, and our rules usually relate back to our values. Like, I like to treat people right, and therefore my rule is that people should treat me right. But if people don't treat me right, that offends me, and I get offended, and that's a problem for me, because I'm trying to control how they treat me, but they don't know what my rules are, because I haven't met them and handed them a list of, these are my particular rules, this is how I need to live, and this is what you need to do so that you can make sure that you don't offend me in any single way. And that's my control. And I worry that our society is going that way. You offend everyone now by things that you say and people that you do, but it's only because other people have rules that we're not even conscious or aware of. And that's people trying to control all the time, and control what you say and control what you do. And that's a very dangerous space for us to be in. Because, as you said, Dan, there is no real control. There's an agreement that we will communicate in a certain way, and we will try and be nice people and our best people and try and be good to each other. But that's an agreement. It's not a control.
And also, even if we share similar values, actually our interpretation of that value might be slightly different, and that in itself can create, conflict. And feelings like, you haven't got any level of control. I think, but as you say, it can lead to so many problems. And, we kid ourselves sometimes that, if we haven't got all the resources, then we can't do anything. I learned learned that lesson even when I had all the resources in order to be able to deliver my house project, which I talk about often. I still didn't have control because I didn't know that my builder was going to have a complete relationship breakdown amongst a whole other load of other challenges, that basically his whole business went tits up. And of course, at that point, he'd gutted my house and there's no back wall to the house. And so, I'm kind of like looking all the way up through, to the rafters of my house, through 3 floors. And, that is the epitome for me of, like, even when everything is there perfect, all I could do was choose my response in that moment. And actually, I didn't get angry. I could have done, but because I am very clear that one of my key values is communication, and this guy could have done a runner, but he came and told me to my face, what had happened. And because I value, my direction of travel hadn't changed, I was still going to have to do the house in some way, shape, or form. But because he'd come to talk to me about it, we worked together to find a way that I could get back into a house that did have a back wall and was renovated. Yes, it did. We worked differently, but by recognizing in that moment what was really going on and my values, he had responded in a way that worked for me. And it didn't cause me stress. I mean, yes, I had to step back from work a bit because I became project manager extraordinaire, but that was a choice I made in order to do it. So I'm never doing a house project again, needless to say.
But that's exactly the way to approach it, though, Laura, what you did there, isn't it? Because how would being stressed and frustrated or angry at him have helped? It really wouldn't.
No, exactly.
And this is what I find, you know, I work with lots of kind of entrepreneurs and business owners and leaders. And, you know, they come to me and they say, Dan, I want some more balance in my life. I want to be able to spend more time with my family. I want to step away from my business. And the reason they can't is because they can't relinquish control. And it's showing up for them, one, in a lack of vulnerability as a leader. So, and also a lack of trust in other people. And that comes because they don't trust themselves, but so they don't delegate properly. Yeah. And they end up over planning and under executing because, again, that planning, it's giving them a feeling of control. And also a lot of those guys that I work with won't take feedback. They've a real resistance to feedback. And I've never understood that. I really enjoy feedback. I don't know what it is about me, but I want you to tell me the truth, even if you think it's going to hurt my feelings, because it won't. And even before I was aware of that, I that's how I was. So I've always been, although I'm not very good at being told what to do, I'm quite easy to manage because I take feedback. But yeah, and you know, and that these guys are coming to me, they're working 50, 60-hour weeks, they're full of stress and anxiety, and it's all because they have this illusion that they're in control of what's going on in their business, that they're controlling the people, and that by doing all this planning, that's what leads to whether the revenue does come in or doesn't come in. And you know, after even sort of 1, 2, 3 sessions, and you see the change in them as they start to realize, oh yeah, life's just chaos. It's nothing to do with me. All I can do is show up as best I can, respond like you did there when your house had been gutted, and you know, all your power you had there, Laura, was in your response to what happened. And so you chose, you appreciated the fact that he came and fronted up and communicated with you, and then you found a way through. But you could have just melted down, couldn't you? And so many of us would have done. And then, you know, because of the illusion of control, we've totally and utterly lost control. So it becomes counterproductive.
Totally. And I think that's it. You know, I've got you popping up on my phone bizarrely.
Are we in a little feedback loop?
I've got you in audio. And my phone is on silent too as well. How weird is that? Anyway, but no, I mean you're absolutely right, Dan. I think it's you know, many other people wouldn't have responded in that way. In fact, I remember at the time doing, you know, writing a post about it and, you know, getting people's thoughts about what they would do. And you're right, you know, there's no point in me getting angry. How was that going to help me? I needed to move back into the house. And, you know, there's no one else going to come and sort it out. So you have a choice. You know, I didn't need any more stress than, you know, sorting out the house.
Yeah, by understanding that you had no control, you kept control. You did keep a bit of control you could have.
But isn't that the line of control right there? Our control is the difference between reacting and responding. Yeah, that's our control. When we react, we're gone in the emotional space before we have a chance to settle into, wait a second, is this the right way to go about this situation? I suppose the response is to choose. But now I know that's challenging, and because for so many of us, we're trying to break patterns. And as you're saying there down in the coaching, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to break old patterns. The pattern of needing to get everything done, needing to be on top of everything, needing to do more work, needing to be at work late. These are all patterns that we associate ourselves with as being that kind of person. And that's our control of ourselves, because we feel we are doing the right thing if we are following to our pattern, because our identity for me is I work hard, therefore I'm always working late. This is my identity, and my control is in trying to match that identity so I can feel better about myself without feeling better in myself.
Yeah.
And when we begin to realize I feel bad in myself because that's not true to who I really am or what I really need, and we begin to change that, the control comes in as opposed to the control going out. And there's our world of response.
Yeah. I totally agree with you, Molly. But you make a really good point about the fact that it's an internal job, but equally it's this bit that I don't think people actually really know who they are without being these defined by, I've got this particular externally referenced item, whatever that item might be, big house, big car, whatever else, big salary. They are defining their worth based on those external things. And so, because it's never going to be enough, there's always going to be a gap. And in that gap lies all of the, the stress, the overwhelm, the burnout, the procrastination, blah, 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 blah. But when you start with really knowing who you are, how you show up, what matters to you, and go outwards from inside, that's a wholly different kettle of fish. And I describe it, quite often, maybe not necessarily the best analogy, but we'll go with it anyway. Like a boat on an ocean, and trying to tether yourself to other boats. If you haven't anchored your boat first, then actually you're just going to, feel very seasick, obviously, because you're just, every time everybody goes and moves the other boats, you're just going to go with it. And so it's so crucial to anchor and ground ourselves first, so that we can make responses rather than reactions. Because if we're doing it in the minute and we're not clear on those things, then actually we're not really going to be true to ourselves in that moment. And thus the reaction then steps forward rather than the response.
Yeah, and immediately what comes into my head, Laura, when you did that lovely analogy, is that the phrase all at sea, because that's how we then feel when we're trying to exert control by tethering to another boat. We're just all at sea, aren't we? And we're trying to affect this control because we think that's what gives us power, right? And our culture is infected by these people who want to control and dominate and therefore feel powerful. And actually, where our power lies is in our innate wisdom, in our innate intelligence, and our ability, as Mark says, to respond instead of react. And when we're busy trying to control everything, trying to get the inbox down to zero, trying to make sure all this and that and the other is done, we're completely ignoring the wisdom, the millions of years of wisdom that is in our DNA. We're completely ignoring source power that guides us through our feelings and shows us the way to go and shows us what to follow. So no wonder we're all so bloody stressed and anxious and we don't know who we are, because we're not listening to who we are. We're not aware.
The world is too noisy.
Yeah, we're all out here all the time. The answer isn't out there. It's in here. And the more you slow down and the quieter you get, and I'm not saying that you should be a monk and be meditating 4 or 5 hours a day. You can do this in 10, 20 minutes, a little bit of slowing down, a little bit of getting into sensing and feeling mode, just noticing what you notice, mindfulness. What can I see? What can I hear? How do I feel? I ask myself that 3 or 4 times a day, just to make sure I stop and go, right, how do I feel? What's going on for me right now? Because I know that's where my wisdom comes from. It doesn't come from my intellect, my 40 odd years of learning. I mean, that's good. And it's great for some problem solving and things like that. But that's not my wisdom is innate. And I always use the tale of the tsunami, right? You remember the Boxing Day tsunami? The animals, they all scarpered. They were gone. The humans, who are supposed to be higher evolved, intelligent beings, we're all standing on the beach going, look at the big wave. Oh my God, it's a big wave. And then when our rationality kicks in, we go, oh, that could be a problem, this big wave. Where's the problem? Yeah. Should we go now? The animals are gone because they have followed their innate wisdom, because they're not busy trying to control anything or thinking that they're clever by using their rationality, because they're not burdened with this thing that we are, our rational mind.
The single brain.
This is what happens, if we can't tap into our innate wisdom, if we can't slow down enough and understand our emotions and our feelings, which are the keys to life, they're the signs, they're the signals. They're the things we should be tuning into and following. We just get trapped in thinking and then trying to exert control by dominating other people or trying to dominate a situation. And it's just stressful, isn't it? And so unintelligent.
No, I hear you, and yeah, our brains can be our worst enemies.
The brain is the original computer.
Yeah.
As we developed our brain function, and whatever point in our evolution we developed our brain function, suddenly we said, well, that's a better function. That works better. Let's give it all the authority and all the power. And so, we use it like as we're growing up to build structures and systems to protect us and to keep us safe, because that's what it's most designed to do. So it doesn't know how not to do that, but we've given it such power and such authority to try and be in control. And therefore it's putting all these procedures and controls in place. But only when we begin to go, well, what is the truth about that? What's really happening there? What's really going on there? And breaking it back down so that we can go, well, that actually doesn't serve. That's actually a piece of control I put in place when I was 7 because I got scared in that situation. I decided the best thing to do is to run, and I keep running since, the system of avoidance or whatever it is that we've managed to put in place. And here we are, this 46-year-old adult, pretending to be an adult, still doing these things.
Pretending we know what we're doing, yeah.
How we know we're still doing these things that worked for us back then, because of that lack.
You guys have made bands in comparison to me. So. Granny here.
Well, there's an interesting thing too, right? There's an interesting side of this, right? Where we don't think we have control, but we actually have control. Yeah. And because mostly we're talking about where we think we have control, but we don't. But there's all these other spaces where we actually have control, but we don't realize we do. And the perfect example is if we have a conflict with somebody. And this comes up so often with clients that I'm working with. And then I've had a conflict with someone, and a person was already telling me the other day about this person they had a big issue with at work, and they've moved roles and they don't have it, so they don't really have to deal with this person, but they see them now. And when they see them, they're like, oh, that person, God damn, I hate that person. Like what they did to me and how they wronged me. And they're seething with anger every single time. And so I was saying to them, like, well, how does that benefit you? You have to react like that every time you see this person. And she was like, well, I don't know. Like, I suppose it's probably not good. So what could you do instead? And she was thinking, she said, I don't know what I could do. And I said, why don't you say thank you? I said, why would I say thank you to this person? Because this person has taught you that of the 8 billion people on the planet, she's not worth bothering with. So there's 7,999,999 other people who are worth more than this person to you. So every time you say thank you very much, I know I don't need to give you any time. I was just thinking, you know what? That really makes sense. And it's just an example of where we've given the control we have away, but we can take that control is ours. We've given that piece away, and because there's that side of things too for us.
Because that's one of the few things we get to control is our perspective, isn't it? Is our point of view, is how we decide, how we choose to view something. And that resentment and bitterness, and that eats people up, doesn't it? And I get it, I totally get it. When you've been wronged, there's an emotion, there's an anger that comes up because it's like, no, I'm not prepared to tolerate that. But what we do as humans is then we hold on to that. Like, I must never forget how angry what they did made me. And it's that old classic thing of drinking poison and hoping that somebody else will die.
Yeah. But even, and I understand too, and I don't want to be too belittling. When the conflict is severe and the emotional reaction is still very, very strong, that has its own time to work through. It can be very hard to be dismissive of that. But when we can, it's like anything in life, when we can transform it. I'll give you an example of another guy I was working with, and he ran a construction company, and he'd hired a friend, and the friend was a disaster. He was one of his best mates in college, and he was even his groomsman at his wedding. But he hired him to do a big, big job for him, and the man was useless working. Very smart guy, and he was like, what do I do here? It's cost me a fortune. And eventually he had to say, listen, I need to let you go. And it really hurt him to do this. But then because of this, he changed loads of processes, and he put all these structures in place and really, secured his business in a good way. I said, how do you feel about that friend now? He's like, every time I think of him, he drives me mad. And I was like, well, I think you should put a poster of him on your wall. I said, why would I put a picture of him up? Because every time you see him, you remember that he's the reason why your business is so secure today. So he's actually done you a favor, because you're not going to hire anyone you don't know. You're going to hire people for what they do and not who they are. And again, it's transforming it so you can thank the person instead of having to feel that level of bitterness.
It makes a huge difference, doesn't it? I mean, but I think to your point though, Mark, there is a time for a bit of anger, but then it's kind of like, what do you do with it? I mean, I remember very vividly my last corporate experience was not a pleasant departure, shall we say, because I was bullied ultimately behind closed doors. And one of the greatest pieces of advice that I received was that I don't understand what the problem is, but you have a choice whether you want to keep your integrity intact or whether I describe it as get into the sand pit and start throwing sand back to the person who's throwing sand at you. You have a choice to make. And I said, no, I'll hold my head up high. What will be, but my integrity was more important to me. And no, I mean, I'm not saying that I wasn't angry at the time.
With good
But
reason.
ultimately, to your point, Mark, there was no point holding on to it. Sorry, Dan.
And that's the thing, is it? And that's the difference, right? And this is where, again, it's about the control. Now, of course, you are angry. When somebody treats you like that, or somebody treats somebody you love like that, of course you're angry. And there's a good reason for that. That's a natural and perfectly normal emotion and way to feel. Mm-hmm. But then we try and exert control by holding on to it. And this is where the problem comes. And of course, as we all three of us sitting here know all too well, life is absolutely horrendous sometimes. It's horrible and it does horrible things to us. And we have some real horrible things to deal with. And all those emotions that come up, and especially with grief, all those emotions that you're dealing with all at once, that's all natural and it's all normal and it's all there to tell you something. And it's a good opportunity for you to learn. And then the problem comes when we try to exert control over it. And as Mark was alluding to earlier, we then start building these thought processes and these behavior patterns in order to try and protect us from that ever happening again. You can't. You cannot protect yourself. And it's something I always do with my dad, right? My dad's an eternal pessimist. Now, that is my dad trying to exert control because he thinks he's going to be less disappointed if he's pessimistic. And of course he isn't. He's not at all. West Ham plays in a big final. He'll say, we're going to lose. Of course we're going to lose. We're going to lose. Because he thinks then if we lose the final, he'll feel better. He doesn't.
No.
Yeah. And it becomes a never-ending cycle then. You convince yourself of that, so therefore we had no control in the first place. But I think there's a on the control piece, and I give talks around a kind of well-being piece, and I talk about control in it. And I often use that coaching tool of CIA, control, influence, accept. And I argue that in every single situation, there is something you can control, and it may not be a control in terms of a choice of action, but it's still also your choice of response. That's always within your remit. And, people say, what if you're severely ill, and yeah, okay. That's, again, the emotional damage of that is quite difficult. But you see people who, I can see my own dad and my aunt. And I went to visit my aunt in hospital when she was dying of cancer. She wasn't in the bed. Where was she? She was round visiting all the other patients to G them up to see how they were. So she wasn't there feeling sorry. She was controlling. She said, what? Everyone else, I control how I would feel. And people can argue that there is no true control over everything. And I always point to Viktor Frankl and his Man's Search for Meaning. The man survived Auschwitz, and he said, when you cannot change the situation, you're challenged to change yourself. So you can't change the external, so you change how you are internally. And he did that because he saw everyone else dying inside and realizing that that's what was killing them before they were being killed. So if he has a modicum of control in what is arguably the most harrowing situation you can put a humanity through, then we can, in our lives, in comparison to that, we all have a certain amount of control.
Yeah, no, I'm with you, Mark. And yeah, I think we so often don't realize that. And one of the things I was kind of thinking through is how so often the world is so busy around you, is trying to take you with it, rather than actually you going in your own pace, making your own choices, actually feeling the feels, as it were. And I know a number of times where I've said to people, it just doesn't feel right. and people go to me, you're just not stepping out of your comfort zone, and you need to, and I'm like, no, it's got nothing, because I'm actually trying to listen for once, trying to listen to what myself is saying, rather than getting caught in the noise of what should be doing and how I need to do something. Well, I don't need to do anything. That's a choice. But it's hard when the world around you is busy telling you you need to get there faster, and there's pressure to apply this, and trying to tune out those messages and realize the response that you can have is yours alone. That can be quite hard.
It takes a lot of training, doesn't it? It's a lot of work. And what you said earlier, Laura, it's the being centered and grounded, and really having a strong understanding of who you are. And it's daily work. And when you do that daily work, and I think one other thing that Viktor Frankl said is about the creating a space between stimulus and response.
Yeah.
And like Mark said, instead of the reaction, because of course when we emotionally react, our lizard brain gets activated, the amygdala, the limbic system, and then we lose all reasonable power to our reasonable brain, because the blood literally just disappears. It goes to the muscles, so you can fight or flight.
That one.
So you completely lose control in this situation. But it takes training. It takes training to do that, because we've been brought up in such a dysfunctional way, identifying with our thinking minds instead of as feeling beings. It takes work. It takes daily work, mindfulness and meditation and quiet times and contemplation and all those lovely things where we can just spend a bit of time with ourselves. And that's what we all need to do. And the three of us here would have been doing that for a long time, and that's what I would recommend with everybody, is to try and just slow down, to understand who you are, and start to trust your feelings, because again, we get taught from very early on not to trust our feelings, and therefore we're giving away the little bit of control and power that we do have.
No, totally.
There's like, I know we've used the word control a lot, and like the illusion of control, and to understand the illusion of control is freedom. And it's all really about freedom. The whole thing is all about freedom. Living is all about freedom. And we are so extraordinarily free. We are extraordinarily free. We just don't realize how free we are. But we choose not to be free. And we choose not to be free for a good reason. We choose responsibilities. We choose to earn money, to pay a mortgage, to have a roof over our head. Okay, that's a choice. We choose to have a family, or we choose, whatever we choose to do. That's a choice. But there's freedom in that choice, because if you're choosing it, there's a control in your choice in those situations. And there's times where, okay, things happen and things change. You lose your job, right? It's terrible. And if your identity is wrapped up in it, it's even more difficult. But your choice then, your freedom and your control becomes, how do you respond to losing your job?
Yeah.
How many people do you speak to who've been made unemployed? When you speak to them 2 years later, will say that was the worst thing that ever happened to me in my life. The majority of people will say that was the best thing that ever happened to me. Why is that? What is that correlation? And it affects people so badly, because it suddenly gives people that sense. Suddenly you lose that, and suddenly there's a freedom on the other side of it. And when we realize how free we are to choose, that's an extraordinary superpower. Like, that should be a Marvel superhero, free man. It's like, what is wrong? Why was this guy? I'm free to choose, and it's just super relaxed because I'm free. I'm not sure how many international criminals he could capture, or supervillains he could capture. You know what
his nemesis would be, Mark?
You know what? That superhero would live a life of joy. His nemesis would be control freak. I don't know if anyone, like, I brought my daughter to see Inside Out 2. And I don't know if you know those Disney. They're Disney Pixar, so there's always a certain deep element to them. And the second one is where the character in it is now a teenager, and they've got emotions, and new emotions come along. And one of the emotions is anxiety. And there's a fantastic scene in it where anxiety takes control. And anxiety goes, we have to figure out a solution to every single possible problem that might occur in the next while. it's brilliantly demonstrates how anxiety is an attempt to control stuff that's out of your control.
Yeah,
and it's brilliant for that. And like it's maybe it's anxiety that is the opposite of freedom.
Yeah, it certainly creates a lot of anxiety. That's for sure. But yeah, I mean, I suppose the anxiety then leads to exhaustion, leads to burnout, leads to all the other things.
Yeah.
Just zaps your energy, doesn't it? I remember I was chronically anxious for years because I was so busy trying to control my career and my destiny, working for the BBC. And the one of the biggest revelations I ever had was when, after I'd kind of burnt out and realized I was going to leave, and so I let go of it all. So I didn't care anymore. So all that, so the anxiety went away, all the trying to control it went away, and all the opportunities I'd been looking for years just came to me. I suddenly got to direct programs on BBC One, to go and direct live sport and rugby league and FA Cup matches, and without having to do anything, it came to me. And I promise you that is true. For years, I've been planning, scheming, making alliances, trying this, trying that, and it all was pushed away from me all the time. And I was constantly anxious and I couldn't sleep, and I was trying to work harder, work longer. None of that worked. The only thing that worked, letting go.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I've seen more opportunities come my way by just letting go of, yes, I've made choices, but I've made choices that are aligned with who I am and, what I can control. And because I'm working with myself, my favorite phrase, it doesn't feel like I'm pushing water uphill with a rake. Which is totally pointless, because I'm working with myself. So, I'm allowing myself to feel, which allows me then to tune in more as to what I need for me to take the next step today, or my choices in that moment. And I'd add to the freedom, it sort of makes for a far more peaceful life.
Yeah.
Far more contentment, as it were.
Yeah, peace, isn't it? And I think that's really what we're all looking for, aren't we? We're looking for meaning. Some of the things we've talked about in the other episodes, meaning and fulfillment and purpose and all this doing. But actually, really, we all just want peace of mind, don't we?
Yeah.
And you said, as you said there, Laura, I made choices. And that's so much of the power of it, is to make the choices. When we sit there thinking, will I not? Is that right? Is that not? If once we make the choices and we take responsibility for the choices we've made, there's where our freedom lies. And that's where and we are, we're in as much control as we can be because of why we know we're making these particular choices and because we've made these decisions. When we don't make any decision, and we're in a really struggling place, because then we're into that control piece. Well, what if I do this? But what if that happens? But if I don't do this, what if that happens? And it's just a spiral and a spiral and a spiral. But once you make that choice and take the responsibility, everyone else is gone. I've made the choice. I've picked the path. And whether we live in a multiverse or not, I'm going in this direction, and someone else has gone in that direction. But here I am.
No, absolutely. And I think we have to realize that the direction is right for ourselves. It might not be right for other people. And that's okay.
Yeah. And I think in that too, with the choice of control, when we say the direction is right for ourselves, we have this tendency as humans to think when we make a decision, when we're in a space, we're thinking, well, everything's a disaster, everything's terrible. But it's a bit like stopping a film after half an hour and thinking, I know how this is going to end. Yeah. We have no idea how it's going to end.
Yeah, we don't know. We don't see the bigger picture, do we? And again, while we're busy exerting control, that's when we miss it, isn't it? And like you're saying there, Laura, I'm making choices, but we're missing the opportunities to make those choices because we're out here trying to exert control on what's happening.
No, without a doubt. Without a doubt. So, well, I mean, it's been another fabulous evening with you boys again.
How is that 45 minutes?
Yeah,
I know, exactly.
Okay.
So, where does time go? And we probably could, I think maybe, Mark, we might actually have to do a 24-hour marathon. What do you think? seriously, I'm up for doing that and getting some other people in to join us to keep it going. Maybe
Like those
we have
old-fashioned telethons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We could do it to raise some money, right?
Yeah.
Or maybe we should consider something.
That's an interesting.
Yeah, I will leave that thought.
Wow.
I'm up for it.
Yeah.
But then I don't have any kids that I've got to go and look after.
You've put the idea out there now, Laura.
Perhaps we should look for what the world record is.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, be amazing. That would certainly probably break some of the algorithms on LinkedIn.
It might break a few of my algorithms as well. Or...
Yeah.
Exactly. Coffee to keep you going. Well, it's lovely seeing you both, and been a pleasure as ever.
Yeah, thanks to everyone who's come along and joined us. We absolutely love doing these things, and we love all your feedback, and we really appreciate it. And we will be back.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
For 45 minutes or 24 hours.
Exactly. Well, goodbye, folks.